Just confirm we are recording. Excellent. Thank you so much. And welcome everybody to this meeting of the Employment Committee on the 16th of July 2026 at the Berries in Godalming. There is no fire drill expected today, but should the fire alarm sound, everyone is asked to leave by the nearest exit and assemble at Berry Fields next to the rear car park. Staff will be on hand to guide you to your nearest exit. Toilets are just outside the chamber on the left, and a water filter machine is located further down the corridor near the vending machine. Please ensure your mobile phones are either switched off or put on silent. In line with our guidance on the use of social media, I am happy for anyone attending today's meeting, including members of the committee, to use social media if this does not disturb the business of the meeting. Today's meeting is being webcast to the public, and a recording will be available online afterward. I would also like to mention that this meeting allows for participation by video conference via Zoom. Are there any attendees on Zoom?
Not at this moment.
Not at the moment. Okay, thank you very much. There's someone waiting on Teams,
Yes,
apparently.
I have a message saying they need to be on Zoom and put the Zoom link on there. Yeah.
For officers and members who have joined in person, may I please ask anyone presenting to speak clearly and directly into your microphones. When called upon to speak, press the centre button on your microphone and start speaking when the red light appears. Please remember to turn off your microphone when you have finished. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have received apologies from Councillor Paul Follows, Councillor George Gladstone New, who is being substituted for by Councillor Phil Bassey, and Councillor James Steele being substituted for by Councillor Liam Lyons. Welcome both of you. The minutes of the previous meeting. That's the meetings on the 21st of May and the 28th of May 2026. The purpose of this part is to approve the minutes of those two meetings as a true record of those meetings. I'd like to pass now to Democratic Services, as there have been a number of issues raised with the minutes in respect of the minutes prior to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So after agenda publication, some inaccuracies on the minutes from the meeting on the 21st were brought to our attention. So the minutes need to be amended to reflect that Councillor Hughes and Councillor Gladstone New were appointed to the Senior Officer Employment Subcommittee. It needs to reflect that Councillor Thornton was appointed to the Appeals Subcommittee as well. There were also a number of typographical and spelling errors which need to be corrected. Thanks to the member who brought that to our attention.
Thank you very much for that, Eddie. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I did circulate this morning a number of inaccuracies from my perspective, which I did circulate to all members before the meeting, which related to the meeting held on the 28th of May, sorry, not June, apologies, been a long day. So paragraph 2, it says members express concern. I think it was only some members, and I think it reads as though all members did, and that's not accurate in my belief. In paragraph 3, it reads the committee emphasised, and I certainly didn't believe it needed to be done, so it was some members of the committee in my view. And further in paragraph 3, it says members requested any decision should be cognizant of the costs associated with that decision. I know that I specifically raised risks and implications because I was particularly concerned about the impact of delay. And obviously that was also part of the risks that were identified in the Part 2 papers. And in the final notes section, it doesn't cover the fact that those additional supplementary notes were Part 2. And it's certainly my experience that good practice would be that they were annotated as Part 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those points. Well made, Councillor Powell. Councillor Keel.
Thank you. I did raise this before the meeting, but I think it's been missed off. Under the appointment of the Investigating and Disciplinary Subcommittee, it states that one executive member be appointed to that committee, and that was myself. So I think my name needs to be added to that one. Thank you.
Councillor Keel, so from when I watched the recording back, it said that the executive member would be confirmed in due course, or yeah, and obviously you have been, but yeah.
So at that point on the 21st, executive members hadn't been appointed yet. I mean, as in they'd been identified, but their portfolios hadn't been confirmed. So I think that was perhaps the reason why it just said executive members. But are you happy with that? Yeah. Were there any other comments specifically on Councillor Powell's suggested amendments to the minutes? Are we content to adopt those changes? Is that agreed? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Are there any other comments specifically related to factual accuracy? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Declarations of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests, significant personal interest, gifts or hospitality accepted. Does any committee member have a declaration of interest in respect of any item to be considered at this meeting, pecuniary or otherwise? I see none. Thank you very much. Our first substantive item this evening is the approach to managing the transfer of staff to West Surrey Council. The report sets out the proposed approach to managing the transfer of staff to West Surrey Council under the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment Regulations 2006, TUPE, as part of local government reorganisation in Surrey. The transfer will involve staff moving from multiple predecessor councils into the new authority and must be managed in a way that protects employee rights, meets statutory information and consultation requirements, and supports continuity of services throughout the transition. The Employment Committee is asked to note and endorse the programme-led approach being taken, including the governance, legal oversight, workforce data assurance, equality considerations and engagement arrangements in place. This does not approve changes to individual roles or terms and conditions, but provides assurance that the transfer process is being planned and managed in a lawful, fair and coordinated way. I'd like to now invite Shella Smith, the People, Workforce and Culture Workstream Lead, to make any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the recommendation before the committee is to continue with a coordinated Surrey-wide approach to TUPE, and officers consider this to be a robust option because it provides consistency across all 12 councils, reduces legal and employee relations risks, and helps ensure employees receive clear and timely information as the transfer process develops. TUPE provides important legal protections for employees. Staff who transfer will do so on their existing terms and conditions. Their continuity of service will be preserved, and employers have statutory duties to inform and consult with recognised trade unions and employee representatives. I would like to draw out just a few of the key issues in the report that are particularly relevant to West Surrey. So firstly, this is a substantial programme. It is the largest local government reorganisation that has taken place to date, affecting approximately 19,000 employees across Surrey. For West Surrey, the transfer will include staff from a number of existing sovereign councils, each with its own terms, conditions, employment practices and workforce data. And in Surrey County Council, where workforce disaggregation is also required, allocation discussions are taking place with employees at the moment. So those are happening between May and August this year, with initial outcome letters expected from late July onwards, and then appeals taking place during the autumn, most likely September, and final allocation decisions communicated later in the year. That is, of course, subject to the service configuration decisions being confirmed by the shadow executive. This activity will inform the formal TUPE transfer process, and all staff from across our 12 organisations will be subject to TUPE. Members will also want assurance that employee wellbeing, retention and engagement are being actively managed, and experience from other local government reorganisation programmes shows that the uncertainty can create anxiety and increase turnover as vesting day approaches. So maintaining positive employee relations is therefore a key priority. To that end, a Surrey-wide consultation and negotiation forum has been established with the recognised trade unions across Surrey. The future Surrey communications platform is in place. Regularly updated, frequently asked questions have been published, and staff engagement and change management activity has been underway across Surrey. And those arrangements are intended to ensure that colleagues are informed, supported, and able to raise concerns throughout the process. The report is also clear about the risks associated with a programme of this scale and complexity. These include the timeliness of decisions on future service configurations, the quality and completeness of workforce data, the challenge of maintaining consistency across 12 organisations, and the importance of sustaining constructive employee and trade union relations during a period of prolonged change. And officers recognise those as significant risks, and they are being actively managed through programme governance and specialist legal and HR advice. Finally, the report confirms the position on terms and conditions following transfer. Employees will transfer to West Surrey Council on their existing contractual terms and conditions of employment, including so any future consideration or changes to terms and conditions, including any potential harmonisation, would need to take place after vesting day and would of course need to be managed carefully in accordance with TUPE and wider employment law requirements. So in summary, the report provides assurance, hopefully, that a robust, lawful and coordinated approach is in place to the transfer of staff into West Surrey Council. And I ask the committee to note the proposed approach and endorse the continued coordinated work needed to support a safe, fair and legally compliant transfer into West Surrey Council. I'll pause there and very happy to take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shella. Claire, did you want to say anything? Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open it to the committee now. I see Councillor Richard Wilson first. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for the report. So first question is in two parts. So there's Foundation Strategic Authority is envisaged for Surrey, East and West, which could happen on the 1st of April. So would some members of staff be TUPE'd onto the FSA? And while we're on that, would they also potentially be TUPE'd onto the Combined Fire Authority or potentially the Pensions Authority as well? And the second part of the question is it possible that some staff could be TUPE'd multiple times, either if they come firstly to one of the shadow or one of the East or West authorities and then to one of these other authorities, or if they are part of a temporarily hosted service component in one or other, and they could end up, since it's temporary, half of them could end up on the other authority. And is that a problem if people are TUPE'd multiple times in short succession? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So for your first question, coming to the Combined Fire and Rescue Authority and the Pensions Authority, some staff from Surrey County Council will be TUPE transferred into those organisations from the 1st of April. For the Foundation Strategic Authority, it's yet to be confirmed what the makeup of that will be, but it's likely to commence with a very, very small cohort of staff, possibly only just the 3 statutory officers that are required. That might mean that over time, other staff do need to be TUPE'd in as that Foundation Strategic Authority grows, and that therefore does bring in the multiple TUPE question that you quite rightly alluded to. So unfortunately, that is a feature of the process. It is possible. It is also possible in the other cases that you have outlined, for example, where a hosted arrangement is in place, but only temporarily. At the point that that hosting arrangement can end and the services can be disaggregated, it is likely that at that point the staff would need to be TUPE transferred again. And the same considerations that we've gone through for this process would need to be put in place for those staff.
Did you have a follow-up, councillor?
Yeah, and just to confirm, it is not a problem if people are TUPE'd multiple times, apart from just rerunning this process. It's not a cost, really.
No, other than the impact on people's morale and, you know, it's a period of prolonged uncertainty for some staff. But other than that, from a legal perspective, it is permissible.
Councillor Thornton?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers, and thank you to you, Ms. Smith, for your very helpful presentation and for the papers. We're being asked to look at, to choose between two options, one of those being the officer's recommended option. But I'm a little bit unclear what they mean in practice. Presumably, the same paperwork is going to have to be done, the same processes are going to have to be done. It's just that what Surrey the different people will be different HR departments will be doing them, or would the processes be different? Perhaps you can say a little bit more about the import of what it is we're being asked to choose between.
Yes, thank you, councillor. Yes, very happy to do that. I think what we are recommending is that through the programme that myself and my colleagues here are working on, we are coordinating the timeline, the letters that will need to go to staff, and trying to do that so that it happens across the 12 organisations at the same time. The risk of doing it all individually, or each council doing it on a different time frame, is that obviously staff will become concerned, confused if in one organisation they've started to have that engagement and then not in the other. We know that our workforces do talk to each other, of course, and it just could lead to prolonged period of uncertainty and anxiety for people. So we're suggesting that it should be done, certainly the way that we are working at the moment, is that we are suggesting it should be done in a coordinated way. We are working really closely with the HR colleagues in all 12 councils already to work on that basis, and they are very supportive of us taking that approach, and so that is why we are recommending that we continue down that road rather than each sovereign council develop their own timeline for the TUPE process.
Councillor Spencer, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a sort of practical question. I mean, as a TUPE transfers go, this is a very complex and huge one. I appreciate that. But the oddity here is the fact that you will end up with people who live in the West who get appointed to the East, and people who live in the East who get appointed to the West. Under TUPE, is their physical location they currently work at one of the characteristics that's protected? Or do we as a council have the right to ask them to work in the opposite side, if you see what I mean, to where they live?
Yes, we can require staff to move to a different location, and that is likely to be the case, particularly for Surrey County Council staff. For most district and borough staff, the vast majority, the council that they work in currently, they will transfer to the new council that covers that geography. But for Surrey County Council staff, some might have their work base, for example, as Woodhatch, which is in the east, but be required through the disaggregation process to move to West Surrey, in which case that would require a change of their workplace. That is something that we are clearly talking to staff about, but it is a feature of TUPE and is permissible provided we go through the proper consultation and engagement processes with our staff.
I have Councillor Hughes next.
Thank you very much. I warmly welcome this report. Just to lance all TUPE transfers are very complicated. I've handled 2 of people coming into organisations I've run. And the numbers weren't quite the same. I think 19 was the largest of the two, but they're all full of complications. And I think this covered everything that I know about, and I was pleased to see that. Also, I think we should take note of the enormous amount of work that's going on to reassure staff, to listen to staff. And I think that's very important as well. There will, of course, be some difficulties, there always are, of people wanting to work in one council, not the other. But I mean, for instance, I know of one highways engineer who lives in Kent and wants to carry on working from the Merrow depot, not the one in the east. And I think there'll be quite a bit of that. My question is, one of the things I learnt to my surprise and at one stage horror is that when people are have a TUPE transfer, TUPE rights, you don't know they're going to actually come and do the new job unless they turn up. They can simply not tell you. I'm sure you have contingencies for that. I just wondered what they were at this stage.
I think that the key really is the engagement and consultation process that we are going through with staff to make sure that they do feel well informed, that they understand what's being asked of them. That is activity that is taking place in each sovereign council, and there is also Surrey-wide activity. So, for example, on Monday this week, there was a webinar that took place for all the staff across all 12 organisations. As part of that, they heard from Andy Brown as the interim head of paid service and Andy's equivalent in East, for example. So I think the absolute critical point there is the engagement and consultation with staff to make sure that they feel really well informed and understand what's happening. And that is work that will be continuing throughout. It's really difficult to I do recognise completely, Councillor Hughes, that is a potential issue, but we're very much hoping that because of that real effort that has been put into consulting and engaging and informing our staff about what's happening, that will be minimised if it occurs at all.
Thank you. Councillor Heath and then Councillor Keel.
Bob said pretty much what I was going to say, but just to make the point from the report, I don't think we're being asked to recommend or choose anything. We're being asked to note something, aren't we? There's no choice in the recommendations. It just says note. That's correct. We're not being asked to make a decision between option 1 and option 2. There's no decision on this item from what I can see.
So we are asking you to endorse it. I haven't got I should, but I don't have the wording of the motion right in front of me right now. But my notes say the Employment Committee is asked to note and endorse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes fair enough sense. Thank you.
Thank you for your point. Do you want further clarity on that? Because
well, I mean, I don't have an issue with the report, as Bob has said. I think the report's fine and it seems to be the right way to go. So I suppose if it was a slightly more controversial report, I might, but not on this particular one. Thanks, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Keel.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to discuss paragraph 6.15.3 and the transfer of senior staff those who may not be successful in securing a role with either new unitary. Thinking, I guess, of some senior county council staff or statutory officer roles, where we would not need more than one of them per unitary, but would leave obviously some staff without a role in the new structure. What happens to them, and who decides which authority that they would be TUPE'd to? And then in terms, I guess, of roles and pay disparity, if their pay is presumably protected, how does that kind of play out, and what are the options, if there are any, for the new unitaries and the sovereign authorities, and how to kind of deal with this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So apart from the chief executives, where the position is slightly different in law, for the other senior officers, including the statutory officers, if they do not secure a role in the new structure or do not wish to, they have the right to TUPE transfer to the new organisation. And any restructuring that will inevitably be required has to take place after vesting day, because it is not the sovereign councils don't have that right in law to be able to make those restructuring decisions on behalf of the new councils. So those have to take place after vesting day, and any consultation can only start then. And any future redundancies, for example, that might be required could take place only after a proper consultation period had taken place and notice had been given to those officers. So that is a particular feature of the local government reorganisation programme that we are going through. In terms of which organisation those senior officers would transfer to, for district and borough staff, again, it would be the organisation that covers the geography that they work in currently. For Surrey County Council senior officers, they will also have to go through the disaggregation process. So the same consideration would apply. The disaggregation process requires that there is an even balance of skilled and experienced staff across the piece. So it couldn't be the case, for example, that all of the Surrey County Council officers went one way and not the other way. So it would have to be balanced out appropriately. But the only other potential way of dealing with that, which has happened in other local government reorganisations, is through voluntary redundancy in advance of vesting day. That would be something that would have to be agreed by the existing councils. So that is something that they would have to agree to. But that is what has happened in other local government reorganisations as a way of avoiding the unnecessary angst, additional cost, a prolonged period of uncertainty and anxiety for those senior leaders and the staff that sit underneath them, actually. So that is an option that could potentially be explored moving forward.
Would any other member like Councillor Power?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add my thanks to Shella and the rest of the team for a very detailed report. There are a couple of things that I just wanted to clarify, if that's okay, Chair. The first thing is really around the statutory designations. One of the issues that was raised to me based on a previous local government reorganisation experience was things that we wouldn't think about, like bridge engineers, which, to be honest with you, I have not thought about. So it would just be quite helpful to understand which officers fall into that, the paragraph 6.16.2, try and get my numbers right, and which ones don't, because I'm not entirely sure. I'm personally very clear, and I'm fairly sure I'm probably not the only one. I think that I absolutely agree that we have to engage with staff. It's a very uncertain time. Having gone through a few reorganisations in my own life, you know, it's very unsettling. But I think it's also very unsettling for our residents. And I think reading this particular report, it is very staff focused, and I understand why. But the title is not so staff focused, and I think somebody reading it perhaps might read differently. So I would just like to really be sure that when we're issuing these reports, that we think about how residents, businesses, communities, other stakeholders would read it, because I'm not sure it comes across in quite the way I would want it to if we're being fully transparent about how we want to do this. There's a couple of places where that is. And then one of the things that's been raised to me, which I think it would be really helpful to understand, is obviously when Surrey disaggregates, we don't have two of everything. You know, there will inevitably be line managers, which will go one way, and then officers will have to split for all the reasons you've just described. So that's not really covered in this process, but I know that all of us want to know who we work for. I actually think that's really important. And one of the things that was brought up to me was, you know, a process for how we identify the people who are ending up without a line manager, I think would be really important. And just lastly, and which tools we use to do that. But lastly, one of the things that's not mentioned at all is benefits. I'm very aware of the fact that although we've got terms and conditions that sit with all of our, you know, all of our staff's contracts, a number of different authorities have different sets of benefits for their staff. And that's not mentioned in here. And I think it would be quite useful to understand how we intend to manage that. Sorry, that was quite a lot, Shella. Apologies.
No problem. I think I've got all of that. So paragraph 6.16.2 here I'm referring specifically to what we sometimes call the golden triangle officers. So the head of paid service, the section 151 officer and the monitoring officer. So it is specifically those roles. Their statutory designation is specifically for the current council that they are designated to. The monitoring officer for Surrey County Council, the designation of monitoring officer specifically applies to Surrey County Council. Surrey County Council will no longer exist from the 1st of April, and therefore that statutory designation ends. So it's those 3 roles that we are specifically referring to. The new authorities will, of course, need to designate their own statutory officers. We'll certainly take away the feedback about the title of the report. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think probably on my part, an assumption that because this is the employment committee, it is focused on employment, but that is certainly something we will bear in mind for future reports. So thank you. In terms of line managers, so part of the disaggregation process for Surrey County Council is that staff must have, alongside information about which new organisation they will transfer to, we will also be telling them who their new line manager will be. So that, as you have rightly identified, is an extremely important piece of information for staff. And they're really keen to know that. So every member of staff will have a line manager allocated to them. And then your 4th point, I think, was about benefits. Those are non-contractual by and large. So TUPE only covers contractual entitlements like pay, annual leave and so on. So we do offer a wide range of benefits for our staff across all of our organisations, be they childcare vouchers or benefits platforms, discounts with local businesses, those kind of things. That will be something that won't transfer over with people necessarily, but it will be something that West Surrey Council will want to think about because attracting great staff to want to come and work for the council is a really important feature of the work that our work stream will be leading on. So we do have a separate work stream that's looking at what benefits that West Surrey might want to consider, but they don't transfer over under TUPE.
Councillor Leach and then Councillor Perrott.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on from what Councillor Powell said, that, you know, we are all here because we want to do the right thing for our residents. But however, I would say that the residents of Hazelmere aren't really worried about what we're doing at this stage. In the long run, they want to be able to be saving money and they want better services delivered. Just a question of what was said so far. When you mentioned the splitting up between the senior management team and there'd be half go into West Surrey and half go into East Surrey, who would be deciding, who would be overseeing that to make sure that there was an equal share of expertise going into those different areas? And also the second question, you mentioned voluntary redundancy before vesting day. If that was to happen and staff to take that up, who would pay for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the split of teams, so there is legislation set out dealing with called the staffing regulations that specifically talk about how local government reorganisation should be dealt with. And it really builds on the TUPE regulations. But it does require, where councils need to be disaggregated, that there is an even split of skilled and experienced staff into the new organisations. So there is a requirement that is laid out in the staffing regulations. The actual decisions on who goes where is the staffing sort of that remit sits with the head of paid service because that staffing comes under the head of paid service remit. So for Surrey County Council staff, it would be the head of paid service for Surrey County Council, and for district and borough staff, it would be their head of paid service, which is generally the chief executive. And then voluntary redundancy, if that were to be considered, and that's still a process that needs to be, we haven't agreed that will definitely be an offer at this stage. It's possible that it could be funded through the implementation plan. That's a possibility. The alternative is that each of the sovereign councils would fund that. It is the sovereign councils that have to make that decision because it is being made on the 31st of March 2027. So it would have to go through the Sovereign Council's decision-making process, but it's still to be confirmed fully if that is going to be an offer and how it would be funded.
Councillor Perrott and then Councillor Lyon. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just a little worry that there might be some salary discrepancies between the staff from different councils. How would that, because we know that some of the councils have been strapped with debt. So, and the increase may not be the same between the different councils. How would that be addressed? Thank you.
Yes, that is a recognised feature of TUPE and is quite likely to happen. I'm just using an example of a planning officer working next to a planning officer from a different council after the vesting day. They could be on different salary rates. That is a recognised feature of TUPE. There is some protection in the TUPE legislation against what could arise in other cases where that happens, which is an equal pay claim. So equal pay legislation requires that for work of equal value, people should be paid the same. And this is what we may trip over as a result of the TUPE transfer, but TUPE does give some protection from that potentially. What we will need to do quite quickly is an exercise of looking at what the pay rates across all of the staff that have then transferred into the new West Surrey organisation. And there will potentially be a process of harmonisation of terms and conditions needed in order to reduce those discrepancies. But that is a piece of work that needs to take place after vesting day. It can't happen before within the law. TUPE prohibits that from happening, but you're absolutely right. That will be a feature, unfortunately, of the transfer and something that will need to be dealt with post vesting day.
Thank you. Councillor Lyons.
Thanks very much. Could I just appeal for a human approach to this when we deal with these members of staff? Because, well, I can only speak from my experience in Woking, but they're highly valued and they're understandably quite apprehensive about the process going forwards. And if we get this wrong, we risk losing some really good people who could make a valuable contribution to the new local authority. I'd like to think of TUPE as a fallback rather than a default. I'd like to see if we can get some sort of harmonisation of benefits, some sort of acknowledgement of preferences when it comes to geographical working areas. And it's probably not as simple as you were formerly in a West Surrey local authority, so we should look to keep you in West Surrey. It might be that you live in a different part of the two local authorities or live very near a border or something like that. So a simple process of seeking stakeholders' views, I think, would be really important. And just the last thing I'll say as a current councillor on Woking Borough Council, the staff on Woking have been through an enormous amount, and morale is understandably, I think it's a little bit better now, but it has been quite low as we've gone through redundancies as a result of losing staff when Section 141 regulations were implemented. I think at a rough count, we're about a third of the workforce in the civic offices than we were before. So just having gone through that process and thinking they were at the other end, along comes LGR. I just please, can we bear that in mind?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think you're absolutely right to point out that this is ultimately about people, and it is the people that deliver the services to West Surrey and East Surrey. And we are very, very mindful of the impact that this will have. It is an enormous change for people. The programme that we have been, myself and colleagues have been involved in has at its heart making sure that staff feel really well involved and engaged with. And we have been running multiple events for staff to make sure that they feel involved and included. And I outlined some of those, but they will continue throughout. They have involved, for example, change management and resilience training for people, wellbeing support. So all of that is extremely important and will continue throughout the programme because we absolutely recognise that. In terms of taking account of preferences, for the disaggregation process for Surrey County Council, as I mentioned previously, we have to ensure that there is a good balance of skilled and experienced staff across the two organisations. But as part of that, we're also taking account of things like people's personal protected characteristics and where we can, things like their preferences. And in many cases, those things happily have married up. But there is an appeal process where people feel that the allocation decision that's been made for them is not fair or hasn't taken account of their personal protected characteristics, for example. So again, we've built that in so that people have an opportunity to have a say.
Thank you. I just wanted to add as well that we work in close partnership with our trade union colleagues. And what's really important with this is that we're already talking about making sure we've got the right number of representatives, because as we've all said, this is not going to be an easy process. And it's one where staff will want many conversations, different types of conversations, group conversations, individual conversations. So we are already thinking about resources, both from a people HR point of view, but also from a trade union point of view as well, to make sure we've got that right level there to be able to support the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just make a very quick follow-up for that? I think if we get out the other end, that this is a sort of KPI for me, if we get out the other end and staff feel valued, staff feel listened to, then we've got it right, and I'll be proud to be a councillor on that local authority. But if the opposite is true, I think I will probably not be proud of it.
Andy, did you want to come in?
Yep, thanks, Chair. So, evening, everyone. I'm Andy Brown, the interim head of paid service. Just picking up on that point, and from the conversations that have been had, is that so without doubt that staff are our greatest asset. So the communication and reassurance that we do through this process can't be underestimated, and we need to keep that constantly from that perspective. We're now at a stage with the service configuration report going to the shadow exec next week that is effectively kicking off this process in terms of where services are going to be going and whether they're going to be hosted, and that enables those conversations to be had. And just what to give you just a flavour of the kind of the staff focus and the people focus during this process is that in a separate element in terms of thinking ahead around how we work with East. And if I take Woodhatch as the county council's HQ at the moment, then there may be a potential whereby staff within that building that are currently going to be potentially TUPE'd across to West. And this is all caveated against those service configurations and those further decisions that are to be made. But you could see a situation whereby it makes sense for West to have a floor in Woodhatch and operate that during that hosted interim period. While there is no kind of immediate 1st of April, everything has got to completely change. And we need to iteratively work this through to the benefit of staff, but also to ensure service delivery and service continuity. So all of those things are being considered during the TUPE process, but this is one of the sequence of events that is now getting triggered through the service configuration decisions, but the further decisions that are going to be made by the shadow executives in both West and East around how those services are going to be not only designed but then work as well from 1st of April.
Thank you. Councillor Shorthouse. Hadn't forgotten about you.
Very briefly, I'm very pleased that so many people have expressed concern for communication and presentation. But it was an observation on when we talk about harmonisation really only goes one way, which is up, isn't it? It's the highest common factor as opposed lowest common denominator, and I hope people are working that out.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to go back to the point that was just made about consultation with trade unions and employees' representatives. Paragraph 6.9.3 talks about the Surrey LGR Consultation and Negotiation Forum. It's obviously really important. Should this committee be getting some sort of reports from it or some assurance that it's performing as it should, or should there even be membership of that forum? Thank you.
So that forum has been set up with the trade union. So at the moment, the representation of that is taken from the current trade unions that are recognised across the 12 councils, which is Unison, GMB, and then a number of the teaching trade unions, because Surrey County Council has about 5,000 teaching staff, and there are a number of trade unions within the teaching space. And we meet monthly. And it is an opportunity for ourselves leading this programme to engage, consult with the trade unions and speak to them about the programme of work. And there are a number of reports that will be coming to future committees where we will, having consulted with the trade unions, will be a huge feature of those reports. And one example that Claire is working on at the moment is the new employment policies for the new organisation. So we have a really robust process in place for consulting with the trade unions on those policies to ensure that those are agreed and the trade unions are happy with them, because that will just make employee relations moving forward much smoother. So it is operating effectively currently.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but I'm just wondering if this committee should have some sort of assurance, a role in the assurance that the forum is operating as it should.
We would generally ensure that is included in the consultation section of any reports that come here. So that is how we would ensure that members were kept informed about the trade union view and employee representatives, where relevant, view of any issues that we bring to the report to the committee.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you very much. I think my concern has just been raised about harmonisation. I think it was 19,000 staff. In my experience of having gone through reorganisations, this is going to be millions and millions of pounds. And I've never seen anything so far which says this is how we're going to deal with that. I think this is going to be a real issue in the future. So it's sort of already being raised, but I'm really concerned about that.
I think it will be a huge issue, and in other areas that have gone through local government reorganisation, it is something that they have, you know, it has been an issue, and it is something that has to be dealt with. It is something that has to be dealt with post-vesting day. It can't be dealt with before, but it absolutely will be a key feature for those new organisations. And that work to harmonise T's and C's will have to have at the heart affordability, as well as balancing that with the need to have an attractive offer that ensures that staff are recruited to and retained by West Surrey, and that balance is going to be absolutely crucial to that work.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to build on something Councillor Lyon said. Obviously, I think we would all view this as a successful transfer if we retain as many of our staff as possible. That's what we all want, right? We want all of the staff to transfer. I think the experience from other local authorities who've gone through local government reorganisation sadly isn't that, and they have lost people between when they start the process and vesting day, and they've also had to gain people between those two dates because obviously they hire people. And I'm just wondering how the intention is to be managing that in the context of what you raised earlier about the fact that the structural changes order says you have to have balance between East and West. So you may have started with balance and then you may not end up with balance, and how that's going to be managed. Thank you, Chair.
So there is a piece of work that we'll be bringing to the shadow councils, hopefully in the autumn, that will provide some data for the authority around how retention and other key metrics for the workforce is panning out. I can say at the moment in Surrey County Council, turnover is really low. It's 8.8%, which is extremely low. But the experience, as we have said it from others, is that unfortunately that is likely to increase the closer to vesting day that we get. But so we will be providing some updates to the Shadow Council. We're just working on consolidating the data from 12 different systems into a report at the moment. Sorry, Councillor Powell, I haven't answered the second part of your question.
So the second part of the question is, as you know, the reality is, I think that, you know, there will be people who leave, there will be people who join. You may start with a disaggregation perspective that is balanced east and west, and then you may find through attrition, and then there could be very good reasons why they're leaving. It might not be because they don't want to work for us, you know, but that balance becomes unbalanced, and it's really about how we're managing that.
Yeah, thank you. So you're absolutely right. So once we've gone through that disaggregation process for the county council, there will come a point where we have to write to staff to tell them that that's their allocation. We could technically change that allocation if it was absolutely crucial, but that would be, you know, coming back to other councillors' points, that is not something that would be desirable. It may be the case that we have to pass over some of those vacancies to the new authority. We could recruit potentially to fill those roles as well in the meantime. And we already are telling people when we recruit that local government reorganisation is happening and that they will transfer to either East or West Surrey or one of the other new organisations in the future. So we are making that really clear in the meantime.
Councillor Leach.
I think it's absolutely right, and I'm pleased that so many people are talking about how important it is for staff and bringing them on the journey. I just have a question when it comes to their current employers. When would be the cut-off when the current employer would stop employing someone on a new contract? So would they be able to appoint a new role on the 30th of March next year, which would automatically move over to on 2P? Would there be a cut-off of which we, as the Shadow Authority, would go, hold on a second, no, we need to be part of that discussion?
So we are doing some work across the 12 organisations at the moment to look at when would be a sensible time to stop recruiting. Under the legislation, you could technically keep recruiting right up until the day before vesting day. We just would need to be careful, of course, of any Section 24 consideration. So that's something else that needs to be very thoughtfully considered. I think that there will come a point where it will not be sensible to recruit anymore, just because it won't be possible to induct people. So the sort of cut-off that we're looking at is we have an obligation to provide what's called employee liability information to the new organisations at least 28 days before the transfer. So at some point we need stability in our workforce and no new people coming in. So that's the absolute latest I think that we would be recruiting, but it's likely to be a little bit before that.
Did any other member, Councillor Perrott?
A slight follow-up with that one is that, so how do you believe, so at the end of it all, before vesting day, we would have an idea of who have left, who decided not to stay, the staff would decide not to stay. How would you balance that with versus new recruits? And what if suddenly, because of the budget, we're not, we can't hire any more people, and then the people who left, you know, we got to replace them somehow. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if there were any really business critical roles that needed to be replaced, those are the sorts of ones that might be prioritised. So, for example, social workers in the county council space or planning officers, those roles that are actually quite difficult to recruit to, we would prioritise recruiting to those. It is possible that that there may be some other roles where we simply pass that vacancy over to the new authority, and they would then make a decision about whether to appoint to those roles or not.
If there are no other members who wish to comment or ask a question, just checking. Okay. It is recommended that the committee, one, note the proposed approach to the management of the transfer of staff to the new West Surrey Unitary Authorities under the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment Regulations 2006. Two, note that the approach is designed to ensure compliance with the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment Regulations 2006 and associated employment legislation, including the Public Sector Equality Duty. Three, note the governance program controls and assurance mechanisms in place to support the delivery of a consistent and coordinated transfer of undertakings protection of employment regulations 2006 process across the Surrey councils. Four, note the key considerations associated with the transfer, including employee assignment, differences in terms and conditions, senior leadership arrangements and equalities impacts, and the measures in place to manage these. And five, endorse the continued development and implementation of this approach through the Local Government Reorganisation LGR program. Is that agreed? Thank you very much, everybody. Can I please just pause our meeting for about 5 minutes? I just need to stand up and get some more water. Thank you very much. Our next item for consideration is establishing a new terms and conditions framework direction. This report asks the Employment Committee to provide an early strategic steer on the terms and conditions framework for West Surrey Council ahead of the new council being established on the 1st of April 2027. The new council will bring together employees from Surrey County Council and the district and borough councils in the West Surrey area, with existing contractual terms protected by the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment Regulations 2006. A clear direction is now needed so that officers can develop detailed proposals for the employment offer that will apply to new appointments to West Surrey Council and provide a basis for future workforce planning. The report recommends, in principle, alignment to the National Local Government Employment Frameworks, including the NJC Green Book and, where appropriate, the relevant JNC frameworks for chief officers and chief executives. This approach would provide a recognised and consistent foundation for the new council's terms and conditions, while allowing targeted local flexibility where this is necessary and justified. It is considered the lower risk option because it supports consistency, comparability, employee relations stability, and management of equal pay risk during a complex period of local government reorganisation. I'd like to hand now to Shella Smith, People, Workforce and Culture Workstream Lead. Thank you. Oh, no, I beg your pardon. I'm going to hand to Claire Weavers, People, Workforce and Culture Workstream Deputy Lead for the West. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks committee's views on the approach to the employment terms and conditions for future employees of West Surrey Council, and specifically whether the National Joint Council, or NJC Green Book, should be adopted as the foundation framework for those arrangements. As the committee will be aware, West Surrey has a unique opportunity to establish the employment framework for a new organisation. In considering the options available, officers have assessed both the advantages and risks of adopting a nationally recognised framework compared with creating a wholly bespoke set of terms and conditions. The officer recommendation is that the Green Book provides the most appropriate starting point for a new authority. It is the framework used by the vast majority of local authorities and is familiar to employees, managers, HR professionals, and trade unions across local government. It provides a well-established and legally robust foundation while still allowing the new council to determine many aspects of its own employment offer locally. From an employee relations perspective, the framework is also the basis on which national collective bargaining arrangements operate. Whilst future local policies would remain a matter for West Surrey, adopting a recognised national framework is likely to provide a well-understood starting point for engagement with the trade unions during what will inevitably be a significant period of organisational change. It may be helpful to briefly explain the distinction between those elements that are largely described by the Green Book and those where there remains significant local discretion, and that's been outlined in the Appendix 1 of the report. There are a number of core provisions that sit at the heart of the framework. These include participation in national pay negotiations and annual pay awards, the nationally agreed occupational sick pay scheme, recognition of continuous local government service, enhanced maternity provisions, and the established framework for consultation and collective bargaining. Alongside these core provisions, the Green Book establishes minimum employment standards in some of the areas. For example, it sets minimum annual leave entitlements, but councils are entirely able to provide more generous arrangements if they choose to do so. Importantly, many of the employment arrangements that staff experience day to day are determined locally rather than nationally. The Green Book does not prescribe a standard working week, and it does not require a particular flexi time scheme, and also does not determine approaches to hybrid working. The councils also retain discretion over areas such as redundancy enhancements, car allowances, additional leave benefits, wellbeing provisions, volunteering leave, and a range of other employee benefits. The practical effect is that West Surrey could adopt the Green Book as its foundation while still deciding through future member decisions where it wishes to offer additional benefits, greater flexibility, or a distinct employment offer that reflects the culture and priorities of the new authority. The recommendation from officers is therefore that adopting a nationally recognised framework would provide stability and familiarity during a period of significant change, while still leaving the new authority with considerable flexibility to shape local policies, benefits, and working arrangements in line with its own priorities. The recommendation is also for new staff only and not transferring staff. So, subject to the committee's decision today, officers will either use the Green Book as a baseline for developing the detailed employment offer for West Surrey, or undertake further work on the implications, risks, and timetable for developing an alternative framework. In either case, officers will bring detailed proposals back to the committee for decision, including those areas where local discretion remains and where the new authority will need to determine its own employment offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire, for those comments. Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Wilson, Councillor Spencer. Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, there's a lot of assertions here, a lot of saying this will do this and it will enable us to do the other, but there's nothing in this paper that backs that up. It may or may not be the case, but we do have to recognise, as it says in paragraph 6.4, that all 12 existing councils in Surrey have taken a different route. Now, they may have taken a different route for different reasons, but I don't know whether that's the case. So, I mean, certainly in the second of the recommendations, 2.1.2, where it says agree that officers develop detailed proposals, I do think we should leave out the words on this basis. I would like to see the financial modelling and the workforce impacts and equality considerations, but not simply on one basis where we have no proof of that either way. And I understand this has not gone to the executive, so we have no steer from them, which I'd be happy to have a steer from them. They may have a different view.
Thank you for that, Councillor. As far as I understand it, we're being asked to give the steer. So if you wanted to see, you know, both, I should actually hand over to Claire to answer the question. Thank you.
So what we were hoping for today, obviously through discussion and through your direction, is that we then go back and we do that modelling. We look at the 12 different sets of terms and conditions that we have, that we also align that to the national set of terms and conditions as well, highlight where we have flexibilities. But I think it's important through that modelling, it'd be very clear then as to where the variances are, because we may find that through the 12 sets of terms and conditions, we are very closely aligned to some of those areas, and others where there are greater variances. So I think that modelling will certainly provide that very clear picture and will help provide a decision going forward.
Thank you. And just to add to that, the Green Book currently covers about 1.4 million staff. About 86% of councils do actually use the Green Book. So Surrey is quite unusual in not following the Green Book. And there may have been good reasons historically for that. But what we're recommending is, as a basis for the new employment offer for new employees of Surrey County Council, that in our opinion is a really good starting point, whilst still giving a great deal of flexibility for West Surrey to be able to set the terms and conditions framework that it feels is most appropriate. But it is a very, very widely used framework in the local government sector.
Thank you. There's both very helpful answers, but in the recommendations, if we pass 2.1.2, which includes the words on this basis, I've been around in local government long enough to know, but councillor, you agreed to this at your meeting in July. And this is the only way we're going to go. So I think we have to take out those words and then we can judge whether or not what is being said is the way we want to go or not.
Thank you, councillor. Let's go to councillor Wilson next, please.
Thank you for the report and for sending us the whole document of the NJC Green Book as well. I think there's compelling arguments in the report for using the Green Book, so I won't go on about that, but including things like the increased leave and other benefits that you mentioned, and the market supplements to address any retention and recruitment problems. But just looking at it from the other side of the argument, so West Surrey Council is going to have a massive debt problem, and it's going to have a huge problem setting a balanced budget. If we hypothetically got to a position where we're pulling every lever to try and save costs and avoid imminent Section 114 and loss of control, would the Green Book remove a lever that we could possibly pull to reduce staff costs very quickly?
There's two things here because I think Councillor Hughes is almost asking for, can we have an assessment of Green Book versus local, and maybe that is something that we can consider from that perspective. So from my perspective, Green Book's easy because you don't need staff to necessarily do that local negotiation, and you can go through that. That's all done at a national level. To answer Councillor Wilson's question, it does therefore remove some local wriggle room around that perspective. But to focus on that aspect as well is that from a staff perspective, and I realise what I'm going to say and try to couch it in a way that is going to be realistic. But when you're looking at cost of living and pay award from that perspective, and indeed in consultation with unions that I've undertaken on pay awards as well, there's almost a reduction of workforce to allow a cost of living pay award to happen, and the unions would look to that as well. The reality of West Surrey's financial position is that the pay award, not issuing a pay award, yes, it does give you that flexibility in terms of a financial position, but there is going to still be a requirement to cut the financial cloth accordingly around that, and therefore the willingness of staff, I think, is of fundamental importance, and therefore do not underestimate the pay award as a part of that morale in service delivery. I can't argue with what you're saying because you're quite right in terms of the local wriggle room, and I think that goes to Councillor Hughes's point around the comparison of the two. How is it best to decide which option is best?
Yeah, thank you for the answer. It's totally clear. Just to be absolutely clear, I didn't, and I'm sure nobody here got into politics to try and cut people's cost of living pay awards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Spencer next. Thank you.
Yes, I think I want to pick away at what we're being asked here. So are we being asked to recommend that the Green Book is used for future employment, or the basis for future employment? And would that decision then go to the executive? Because I think that's an executive decision and we can recommend, but it's not our decision. Or are you saying you want to use it to do the comparison with the existing terms and conditions from the 12 sovereign authorities, and then you'll come back to us with the comparison, and then we can make a recommendation about whether it should be used?
It would be the latter. So it would be doing the comparison work, bringing it back, having that detail, having that really good discussion, and then getting a direction from that point.
So I think on that basis, Bob, I think on that basis is the correct wording to do that, as long as it isn't assumed that we've said, yes, go ahead with the Green Book. But clearly they're not saying that.
Thank you. Thank you. I assume you want to make a comment through me, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm just agreeing with Lance. It means we have to get rid of 211. And then obviously the last three words in the first line of the next one. And then we may decide that's absolutely the way to go. I just don't know.
Okay, we can absolutely come back, I'm sure, but there are other members who would like to speak as well. Can I call now Councillor Bassi? Thank you. Bassi or Bassi? I beg your pardon, sir. Bassi, thank you, sir.
I'd like to agree with the points that a couple of other councillors made, that we're being asked to make a decision when we don't actually have any financial data to base that decision upon. It's not to oppose the benefits of the Green Book and benefits of consistency. I just don't feel that we have the information to set a direction as it stands, and to qualify that, as other councillors have suggested, I think is a very good idea. A second point, if I may, by adopting the NJC Green Book for new employees, how does that sit with harmonising the employment terms of all employees within the new authority? If we're going to have to harmonise between the existing sovereign councils, how do we have new employees on different contracts without inviting further harmonisation? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So for the first part of your question, we are looking for, in principle, for us to go away and to provide that comparison level of detail for you. I think it's really important because you can't make a decision without actually having that information of what we have now, what the 12 currently look like versus what the national is. Also, to look at those flexibility elements as well, because I think that's where we have discretion then to think about what do we really want going forward for the new employer. So I think that's really important that we are able to take that away and to bring that back, because then that gives you and supports a more informed choice of direction of travel. With the second part, it was around harmonising. I didn't know if you had a...
I think in relation to the second part of your question, Councillor, so at the moment we have discrepancy across the 12 Surrey councils because everybody is on local pay. And what we're suggesting is that the Green Book will allow us to move forward with a framework that is well recognised within local government. So a number of the councils currently do follow a number of the principles that are already outlined in the Green Book. So, for example, sick pay schemes across the 12 councils largely align with what's in the Green Book. But when other local government employees are transferring in from when we're attracting new staff to come and work for them, most staff from outside of Surrey are very used to seeing terms and conditions aligned to the Green Book, and they expect to see them as a minimum. That is why we are recommending it as a solid framework to build from for the future. It is also worth remembering that we do already have a number of groups of staff on national conditions. So teachers, for example, we have to, by law, they have to follow the national teaching framework. Educational psychologists are on national pay, firefighters are on national pay, and youth justice workers and coroner staff are on national pay. So this isn't unusual. We do have other groups of staff already on national pay frameworks, and we're just suggesting that that is a useful framework to build the new authorities' terms and conditions from in future. But completely appreciate that you need to see the financial modelling, and our intention was, if you were comfortable in principle with using the Green Book as a starting point, then we would bring back a costed model to the next committee or to a future committee.
Thank you. That is really what I was asking for. It's a comparison of where we are now, the financial implications of the decision we're being asked to make. And I take Councillor Wilson's point that we are in a fragile, to say the least, financial situation. We have obligations to set a balanced budget, and I don't think we should be making significant decisions with a financial impact unless we properly assess them. And I would like within that analysis to either include or exclude the effect it might have on the employees that are TUPE'd across. I take your point that there are already other people on national negotiating contracts, but we're talking about the people who aren't on national negotiating programs. They're the subject matter here. So I can see the advantage of harmonisation, administration, but we do need to know the financial implications, especially given our financial situation at the moment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in to say there have been a couple of comments about seeking the views of the executive. Just to be clear that it's not an executive function, it is a function of the Employment Committee for you to make a proposal to the Shadow Authority as a whole, not the executive. So it's within your functions and your terms of reference to formulate terms and conditions of employment for the employees of West Surrey Council for adoption before vesting day, and to make a recommendation to the Shadow Authority in that regard. Thank you.
May I just pick up on something that Councillor Basie said? He said that we're talking about, sorry, you said something about existing staff, is that right? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I asked what the Green Book is being applied to new employees, and I asked what effect that would have on existing employees from the point of view of harmonisation. Would we be obliged to harmonise up to the Green Book standards or not? Because it seems a little contradictory that we're harmonising from the sovereign councils and then taking on new employees, and it then becomes a not harmonised position again.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood fully what you were asking. Did you want to come back?
Sorry, so just to say that we are looking at this for new staff. Any decisions on existing staff will then need to be discussed and agreed post-vesting day. So I just wanted to make that bit clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Heath next, and then Councillor Thornton, Keel and Denis, and then Councillor Perrott as well. Thank you. So Councillor Heath, please.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go over everything that everyone said because I agree with it, but just to say, could we not put into the recommendation that we say in principle subject to detailed financial equalities and workforce impact testing? So it's not a kind of final pin down decision, but we just make that very clear in the recommendation that we want that further work. The principles that the officers have spoken about Green Book seem sensible in the way forward, but you know, the section 151 commentary has already been expressed in here. It sets out our challenging financial commitments coming up, and we just don't have enough information in this report to pin down the Green Book way forward, in my view. So just tweaking that recommendation rather than removing it, I think would probably do the job.
So I would agree with you. We don't have enough detail, but that's because we're being asked to give a steer. It's supposed to come back to us with more detail.
The recommendation, in my view, is asking us to make a decision. The recommendation is saying that we agree in principle with this Green Book and the way forward. And from what I've gathered, we don't wholly agree with that. And so the recommendation needs to clarify that point. If it doesn't come out, it needs to be tweaked to say that in principle, yes, but only subject to that modelling that comes forward.
That's great. Thank you. We can make that clearer, I believe. Yes, thank you. Councillor Thornton next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the work that's gone into this paper. I actually came to this from a very similar position to the other councillors who've spoken. I'm concerned about our parlous financial situation, and that we shouldn't do anything which decide anything which inadvertently will create greater costs, which we'll have difficulty absorbing. And so, you talked about the fact that the Green Book would give us a lot of flexibility, but it's flexibility above a baseline. What I mean, I guess we're interested to know is whether the councils in Surrey, in particular the ones in West Surrey, are currently operating below that baseline, in which case, if staff aren't complaining about it, and we've heard that in Surrey turnover is low, obviously staff turnover is affected by very many things, but terms and conditions come into it. If staff aren't complaining and the baseline and they're getting below the Green Book baseline, and to bring them up to that baseline would cost money, then I think we only want to do that, very much with our eyes open. And I'm particularly interested in what such a decision to follow the Green Book would mean for pay. And I particularly wouldn't want us to find ourselves overall with a pay bill which for under the Green Book, which would be higher than for equivalent groups of staff who are employing on other basis. Again, because the pay bill is one of the biggest items in the council's expenditure, and so I'd like to understand. I'd like the financial modelling to cover that particular point. And either now or at a later stage, I'd like to understand in rather more detail how it is that jobs would be matched onto spine points, because that sort of detail would have a big impact on the way on whether or not we'd end up paying more money for the same staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. We're going to do a two-prong approach in responding to you, if that's okay. So the first one around the data and the baseline, I think it's really important that we are incredibly clear with the 12 councils' terms, conditions, what they have in relation to the Green Book, and then we can clearly see where we're at against the baseline, whether we are lower, higher, or who is lower or higher, because there could be some variances in that. So that modelling, that information that we will share with you will be very clear as to what that looks like. And then we would have some indicative costs based on that baseline as well. And then we can talk about the flexibilities and what the range is of what the ranges could be of those flexibilities as well. So all of that will be made very clear. But thank you for your question.
And in terms of whether local pay or national pay would cost more, it's really difficult to say, because obviously that is negotiated each year. So it's very difficult to predict forward what the national pay negotiations might be versus the local pay negotiations. But certainly in terms of how the national negotiations work, there is a briefing across every region in England, where each employer who has adopted the Green Book is able to contribute to say what is affordable for them that year. And then the employer's side of the National Joint Council will take that away and consider that in terms of the offer that they make to the trade union side of the National Joint Council. So there is a process where views of each employer who's party to the Green Book are considered. But it's very difficult to say moving forward whether as I say, we don't know what the pay offer will be for 27, 28 at this point in time.
Chair, if I may, you appeared to be describing sort of when you were talking about pay, you were talking about pay increases, which is obviously an important part of the picture. I guess I'm as, if not more, concerned about how you fix the starting point, the baseline. In terms of how you map jobs right at the beginning onto the pay spine, and so create your initial sort of pay obligation, because that will be absolutely crucial in terms of determining in terms of your pay bill.
The National Green Book does have a pay spine, but it is completely for employers to decide where they peg each of their grades. So that is completely open to local discretion.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up,
Yeah,
councillor?
will you be, that's really helpful to know. Will you be coming forward at later dates with a description as to how you would sort of allocate sort of jobs to pay points? Because I think that some analysis of that in due course will be useful.
It is an enormous piece of work to do that in advance of vesting day, and it's probably something that would have to happen after vesting day, but it is in our work programme to consider that. So we simply haven't done that thinking as yet, because it is, as I say, and I'm sure you will appreciate, a huge piece of work to do that for thousands of employees.
Beg your pardon, councillor Keel.
Thank you. In listening to some of the other answers, I think you've probably covered some of these, but I just wondered what the flexibilities are within the Green Book national terms for that councils can take. Thank you.
Sorry, councillor, this is when my laptop goes off and I have it on the screen, so please do bear with. Okay. So let's have a look. So the I'm just scrolling down to the flexibilities. So annual leave, for example, in the Green Book sets a minimum entitlement of 23 days on appointment, 26 days after 5 years, including bank holidays, and 2 additional statutory days. So that would be our baseline that we'd be looking at. And all 12 councils, I am sure, will have different levels of annual leave that they have agreed locally as part of their terms and conditions. The working hours, the Green Book does not require a standard working week, but we've got some variations of 36 hours, 37 hours and other variations as well. So we can certainly look at that. Flexi time, although it's not prescribed nationally, again, we operate very differently, and it varies from no flexi scheme to limited time off in lieu to generous flexi schemes as well. And I think there are going to be so many different variances with this that, you know, we talk about having that comparison. It needs to be really detailed to highlight where those flexibilities are and what that could potentially look like. So it just gives you a flavour, but there are many.
Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of us agree. It's been fairly similar across, and I think the biggest problem for me is the recommendations just need to be reworded. You know, if I can suggest or propose, because I think Councillor Hughes sort of did mention this, I think 2.1.1, I think that needs to come out, because that talks about agreeing in principle the future terms and conditions. Well, we're not in a position to do that. 2.1.2, the first line taking out the words on this basis, and then possibly in the including financial modelling, etc., maybe risks need to be in there as well. But other than that, that I think is what we all want, that piece of work to come back. And 2.1.3, the last bit of it, I think can come out. But I think that first recommendation is probably what's skewed us a little bit tonight, because we've all looked that this is to make the recommendation of exactly what we're doing, where the second recommendation is what we want is come back, do the comparison, let us see the costs, what are the risks, you know, what are the benefits, etc. So I just think those recommendations, if we got them right, actually most of these conversations aren't really needed until we have that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I make a suggestion that might help members, if it's acceptable to officers as well, that potentially if recommendation 2.1.1 was removed and then the first recommendation was a combination of both, to say that the committee resolves to require officers to develop detailed proposals regarding the potential alignment of future terms and conditions to the National Framework for Local Government Services, including financial modelling, workforce impact, risks, equality considerations and implementation requirements for consideration at a future meeting of the Employment Committee, which would give officers the the authority tonight to go away and do that work, but makes it very clear that they would be considering those issues and then bringing the matter back to you for further consideration at a future meeting. And that with 213, as Councillor Dean has suggested, just if the last few words were removed, leaves that slightly wider in terms of engagement with the unions, if that suits what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Susan. That's really helpful. And I can see people nodding as Susan is reading out those suggested amendments, suggest changes to our recommendations. I have though got Councillor Perrott and Councillor Shorthose would like to contribute to the debate. Thank you, Councillor Perrott.
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Spencer that do a comparison and an analysis between the current, and then we do a best practice thing that you know, so that we can, as they said, using this word a lot, harmonizing between the current staff and new staff. That's a lot to do, I understand, but it has to be done so that best practice is what people want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Shorthose.
I think covered somewhat by Councillor Perrott. It's sort of, so if we don't do the national framework, what do we do? And that sounds like a very long-winded and complicated process, taking the best from 12 or 6 different frameworks, which I assume is what the alternative is.
Thank you. Does any other member want to contribute to the debate? All right, in that case, now's the bit where I read out the recommendations, but can I ask you to read out the recommendations again, please? Because you know, if it's not here, I don't know what I'm saying.
So, Chair, I think the first recommendation is that the Employment Committee require officers to develop detailed proposals regarding the potential alignment of future terms and conditions to the national framework for local government services, including financial modelling, workforce impacts, risk, equality considerations and implementation requirements for consideration at a future meeting of the Employment Committee. And then the second recommendation would be support early and ongoing consultation with recognised trade unions and engagement with employees on the development and implementation of the proposals. That works.
Councillor Powell.
Sorry, Chair, just one thing that's not covered in that recommendation is the comparison with the existing terms and conditions. I'm just wondering if we could add that in, because that is what we've discussed, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Perhaps if we just add the words and comparison with other options,
Yeah.
would that?
I beg your pardon. Comparison with.
Comparison
compared
with
other
existing.
options?
With existing, I think is better.
With the existing terms and conditions. Okay.
Does that address the concern, Councillor?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Thank you very much, everybody. Our next item for consideration is the overview and scrutiny recommendations, executive search provider procurement. This item follows the West Surrey Shadow Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee's consideration of the executive search provider procurement. The Scrutiny Committee's recommendation is detailed in a supplemental pack which was circulated to the committee yesterday. Following that debate, the chair. No. That's after the debate. I'll read that bit later. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so are there any comments on those recommendations from the West Surrey Shadow Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee? Councillor Spencer first. Thank you.
Sorry, it is a query about the actual wording in there. So on the penultimate line, the word involved in the recruitment process, I'm not sure what that means because it wasn't in the original discussion I had at that committee meeting. So I'm sure it's been added for a reason, but I can't quite work out what the reason is.
I'm really sorry, councillor, but which bit are you looking at?
So it's the penultimate line. So I'm in section 2A dot, where it talks about where a candidate for any golden triangle appointment, yes?
Currently employed by a sovereign authority. I'm sorry. Yes.
So the purpose of this was simply to say, if a candidate comes forward from a sovereign authority, that the councillors on the employment committee and on the senior employment committee who are in that sovereign authority should not be part of the process. And that's what was agreed in the employment committee. This is saying almost that, but then this wording involved in the recruitment process, I'm not quite sure what that's trying to say. Which recruitment process is it talking about? I have checked with the vice chair of the committee and he agrees this wording was not intended to be in there.
Okay, so I think we're a little bit stuck because all I've got is the recommendation that was in front of me. I don't have any other information about what may or may not have been intended by the chair of that committee. Are you able to shed any more light?
Yeah. I'm not really, Chair. I'm afraid this has come from the draft minutes from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which are draft at the moment. They've not been approved by that committee. So it's hard to comment on their accuracy, but it's come from the Democratic Services Officer that clerked that meeting.
Indeed.
And I believe it's been shared with the chair, who was invited to come this evening, but chose to leave it as a paper document.
Councillor Keele?
Just on a procedural point, I mean, surely recommendations should be agreed by the committee in the session. So it's a bit strange to have wording that the committee hasn't agreed kind of floating about in minutes. So obviously we can't really comment on what's in front of us here. I would just worry about the consistency of any employment panel if members had to recuse themselves for particular candidates. That doesn't give a particularly consistent approach for employment. And also, furthermore, the idea around conflicts is that members determine whether they perceive themselves to have a conflict or not. Perhaps the monitoring officer could have issued some advice on that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to, Chair. I mean, we have our usual local government principles in place regarding bias and the perception of bias, as well as predetermination and prejudicial interests. Don't think it would be, those would be relevant, but clearly bias and perception of bias could potentially be relevant. But the onus is always on the member themselves to determine whether they think they do have a bias or whether they come to a decision with an open mind, and whether a reasonable, rational member of the public with all the facts would consider that their judgment is impaired or not. So that's one of our normal principles in all decision making, not particular to the Employment Committee, and it would be a matter for individual members on that committee to determine whether they could act impartially or not.
Councillor Spencer, I think your microphone is already on.
Sorry about that. So absolutely appreciate exactly what you say there. This was purely about the optics of the process for these top three roles. And I have to say all 15 members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee voted for this with no question about it. They just assumed this would be the case. It never occurred to them that this wouldn't be the case. So it's a strong recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The intention was simply, and I'd use myself, if Andy Brown is putting himself forward, I come from that sovereign council, so I would accuse myself from that. That's what we're looking to do. And you could say, well, everybody should just do that anyway. But you know, I might take the view, well, I don't know Andy that well, so you know, maybe I just don't want to recuse myself. So that's what this was put in for, and it was, as I say, overwhelmingly supported by the overview and scrutiny committee without any hesitation. It really went straight through.
Did you want to come back, councillor Keel? I beg your pardon for the interruption. Councillor Spencer, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you very much. Councillor Keel?
Did the Overview and Scrutiny Committee discuss the kind of consistency element which I raised about the panel? If members are having to duck in and out for particular candidates, how is that a fair process for all candidates? Was that discussed at all?
No, that wasn't discussed, but then the overriding criteria seemed to be that the optics at the end of a process where councillors have, know the individual very well, have a view about them, work with them all the time. I do with Andy, for example. The optics at the end of the process would look so bad that overrode anything else. I mean, this is not an unreasonable, well, I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to look at for these three roles, because these three are absolutely key roles. And the optics at the end of this process have to be 100% clean, not even a shadow of a doubt, including the example I'm using.
Councillor Thornton?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Keel makes an important point about consistency. My assumption would be that if a councillor felt required to or was asked to recuse themselves from consideration of one candidate, that they probably need to do that for all of them. And so you'd need to come up with a set of selectors, none of whom came from the same council as any candidates. But it does. I agree with councillor that it would be hard to be part of the selection process, but only looking at some of the candidates.
Just from an officer perspective, our recommendation would be that the interview panel for a particular role must be consistent for all of the people being interviewed, which is the point I think that Councillor Keel made. So it would not be best practice at all for one member of a panel to recuse themselves from one candidate's interview, but then see the rest of the candidates. And I'm not sure that is what the Overview and Scrutiny Committee were trying to get at, but that perhaps is not reflected in this minute, unfortunately.
Councillor Leach and then Councillor Lyons, thank you.
Where I totally see the point where Lance is coming from, I just feel, would there be at some point that there'd be no one in the room because everyone knows someone at some point? And so I just would that, it just seems a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I wonder that myself. I do see your hand, Councillor Spencer, but I'd like to go to Councillor Lyons next, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It was me who seconded that that motion in the Overview and Scrutiny Committee because the point that Councillor Spencer made perfect sense to me, but it was pointed out to me after the committee, the very point that Councillor Keel just made, in that it does make for difficulty in the consistency across the panel, and the officer advice reinforces that. Given that almost all of us come from a sovereign authority at the moment, it's inconceivable that we don't know in some form the potential candidates for these roles. How well you know that person, I guess, is a matter for debate, and to some extent will vary from person to person. But unless you want a potentially completely inexperienced councillor or a panel made up entirely of completely inexperienced councillors, it then puts us in a difficult position. And I must admit, having made this statement to you in the committee, Chair, I don't actually know what the solution is, because Councillor Spencer is right and Councillor Keel is right.
Well, I think I might have a suggestion for you, but perhaps I'd like to hear from Councillor Powell. And Councillor Spencer, did you want to come back on some of the things that have been said so far? If that's the case, you just need to nod at me because I'll come to you after Councillor Powell. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to all the arguments and I can see both sides. I think that it does come down to the fact that obviously at the end of the day, full council has to approve these appointments. And what we don't want to be is in a position where we get to full council and people will feel that it hasn't been a fair and equitable process because of the knowledge that people on the panel have of those candidates, particularly if it's somebody who was appointed into an existing role by one of the people on that panel, because I think that would come across as bias. So I think that and I absolutely agree that it would be almost impossible. I mean, there are some new councillors, but Sally can't sit on every single committee, and that's potentially not appropriate either. But we need the balance of experience, but also not a perceived bias. And I think that we need to think very carefully about how we achieve that. And I think maybe the balance is that if they were involved in appointing that person to a previous council, they should excuse themselves. But if they weren't involved in the appointment, maybe that's okay to create a balance.
Well, thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Powell, because I was just about to suggest exactly that. So I'm really glad I called on you. Great minds. But yes, would that make a bit more sense in terms of the balance required for a consistent subcommittee for appointments, which would satisfy the requirements that the officers have outlined for us? It would satisfy the idea that we would want to have experienced councillors on the committee that Councillor Keel has brought, or Councillor Leach has brought up as well, and the sense and quite proper concern that Councillor Spencer has brought up about the optics of things. We don't want to just make good decisions that are made with integrity. We need to be seen to be doing it as well. And so we don't want to have the issue that Councillor Powell has outlined, where our decisions are not seen to be made with integrity, even though we know they were done with integrity, because each of us as individuals, it's up to us to decide whether we are in conflict or not. So having subcommittee members recuse themselves if they were involved in the direct appointment of a candidate when it comes to the decision making, would that satisfy the perception or not? Councillor Spencer?
That was not the intent from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we did have the discussion about, well, aren't you going to run out of people? And the answer was, yeah, there are certainly a number of substitutes for the executive members and the non-executive members available, where it's on, because it has to be, it's not just the person, it is they have to be in the same sovereign authority that you're in. So for me, and as the example, that's he stood. I'm a Surrey County councillor, so therefore I recuse myself. But it's not just because I know him, it's because he's in the same sovereign authority. So you have lots of sovereign authorities, 6 of them, to choose from. And I can't believe that there will be candidates for these 3 positions from all 6 of councils, and therefore you will run out of people. It did come up at the Overview and Scrutiny, and the view was there was enough people available to man the jobs.
But Overview and Scrutiny didn't consider issues of consistency. So I'll just leave that one there.
Consistency across all 3 roles, or consistency per role? Are you saying you have to have the same team for all 3 roles?
No.
No. Okay, so it's consistency per role. So all so it's the candidates will come. Lots of the candidates will come from outside the area, so that's not an issue. Any of those. It is only where there's a candidate from inside one of the existing sovereign authorities where there's been a lot of interworking. That's where I think the optics will get problematical.
Councillor Keel.
Personally, I think it's less than ideal to use substitutes onto this committee for this kind of work. We're all on this committee for employment reasons, and it's appropriate that a subcommittee is drawn from this membership. I think it could get very confused otherwise. So that's my view on that point. Thank you.
There's also the expertise that we have as members of this committee.
Furthermore, like surely as well, there are plenty of people across the wider council who would also be equally conflicted.
Councillor Leach.
I just see there being one big problem is that the current leader of this shadow authority will know absolutely everyone that is putting themselves forward. So would not be able to sit on any of these. And this is the biggest role that that person would be working with that person. So although I totally get the point, I just think that, you know, it feels strange that the person who's going to work with these the most would not be able to be on this committee at all.
Yes. Are there, before I do that, councillor, are there other members who would like to contribute to, or make comment? No, councillor Spencer then?
So the point is that, for example, the leader knows hundreds of people, I'm sure, across. We're talking about those that apply from the area he's in. That's it. So it's not just everybody. And same for me. It's, you know, I know lots of other people around in the council environment, and if they apply for jobs, that's all fine. If they come from Surrey County Council, that's the one where I think I should recuse myself. And all this is doing is asking for that for consistency across the piece.
Okay. So following the debate, it's my role now to seek a consensus on whether to accept, not accept, or partially accept the scrutiny committee's recommendations. So I guess I would ask, is there a consensus around acceptance or non-acceptance? Perhaps the easiest thing to do is to ask for a show of hands, but I see Councillor Shorthose.
Just you mentioned Surrey, Lance. It mentions a sovereign authority within West Surrey. So actually we should add in Surrey if we're looking to this, or Surrey County Council.
Well, that is within West Surrey.
It's well, for clarity, I would extend it because it's not just within West Surrey.
Yeah, because
we keep talking about 6 or actually 7. So if we're looking at terms and conditions, it's actually 7. There are 7 authorities.
Thing is, I find this recommendation really problematic because it's coming from a set of minutes that are draft and haven't actually been approved by the committee from which they came. So I am finding it difficult to say, yes, accept it, or no, don't accept it. Because they are draft and the wording is not
point
clear
of
to
order,
me
Chair.
really at all. So, and may I just ask you both to switch your microphones off for a sec? I do find it difficult to make a judgment on draft recommendations. Councillor Keel and then Councillor Lyons.
Yeah, mine is a point of order for what it's worth.
I'll take it. Thank you very much.
Just if a quick way of getting around that, if that's something that concerns you, is simply to say subject to the minutes being approved by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
So I was just listening to advice from Susan, which is that a point of order is about a point of law being breached or a point of constitution being breached. So are you able to specify which point of law or constitution has been breached?
Well, the process is. Sorry, I was trying to help you, Chairman. It's a very pragmatic suggestion for a quick way to get around your concern. You pointed out that the minutes were in draft form at the moment, which is correct. If that's something that concerns you, you could simply add at the end, subject to these minutes being approved by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That's all. I was trying to help.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyons. I do appreciate it. Councillor Keel.
Possibly what I would say will not help, but I'm not only are they draft minutes, but you've said yourself that they're not what you thought was agreed. So I really don't see how we can consider this.
Does anybody actually want to make any changes to our arrangements on the appointment subcommittee? Councillor Keel.
I would like to see it more gender balanced.
Thank you, councillor. Any other changes? Councillor Powell.
I am concerned about the issue that Councillor Spencer has raised. I don't want us to be in a situation where we go all the way through the appointment situation. We're sat in a full council meeting and somebody stands up and says, this is not visually fair and transparent because of the people that have been involved. And that's my biggest concern. We are already going to be interviewing later than East Surrey, and therefore we're just in danger of making that situation worse. But I do understand the conflict that you are experiencing right now. And I also don't think the committee is aligned, which is that there are some of us that are concerned about that and some of us that aren't. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's absolutely fine. Which is why I was asking whether, taking councillor Keel's point around gender balance to be a bit more reflective of this committee itself, are there any other changes that members would like to make to the operation of our subcommittee? I'm not seeing any. In which case, I would just thank committee members for their views on this recommendation, and we record that we have actually considered the recommendations from the subcommittee. It's not from the subcommittee, from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
So,
well, the thing is, Councillor Spencer, I have asked the committee if they want to make any changes to the arrangements for our subcommittees, and I'm not hearing any apart from one from Councillor Keel. Did you want to come in?
No. Sorry,
Councillor Spencer, please.
Only, Chair, if it may assist, that there is no motion on the table at the moment. So it may be that Councillor Spencer wishes to raise a motion, then it would need to be seconded and a vote taken upon it would be the formality.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Okay, so to simplify it, can I raise the motion specifically to this wording? I'll leave the wording as is because it is a bit confusing, but this is what was come from the other committee. I'd like to move that this is accepted by this committee. These words.
Even though you weren't sure at the beginning that those were actually the words that were okay. Just checking. Is there a second? Councillor Thornton, are you seconding? Thank you. Means I think a show of hands then. So is there any councillor who would like to raise a comment, question or debate on the motion that's on the table? Okay, Councillor Leach and then Councillor Thornton.
I'm just really confused how I can agree or disagree to something that you're not even sure is right in the first place. So I think it needs to come back. It is my say.
Do you mean the overview and scrutiny, as Councillor Lyons suggested, overview and scrutiny needs to clarify what they want us to consider?
Absolutely.
Sorry, that wasn't what I suggested, Chairman. I merely suggested that if that was a procedural issue that concerned you, the easy way to get around it is simply to add subject to the minutes, the draft minutes being accepted as a true and accurate representation of the minutes. That's all I said. I didn't say what you just said.
Quite right. Beg your pardon, Councillor. I think Councillor Thornton wanted to speak next.
Yeah, I'd like to make 2 points. Firstly, actually to ask how many candidates per position would we be talking about? Are we just talking about the shortlist? In which case we're talking about maybe 3? because that will make a difference to the issue about consistency. If you were considering a field of 12, then you might find yourself in trouble. But if you've got a maximum of 3 that are being considered by the councillors, that strikes me as being less of a problem. Having seconded, then my second point is having seconded Councillor Spencer's motion, I'm wondering whether is it appropriate to suggest a minor amendment, or is that procedurally out of order? The amendment that I would make would be to say that recuse themselves from meetings with or about the recruitment process for that person, rather than the recruitment process, rather than that candidate. But I'm in your hands. Maybe it's inappropriate for me at this stage to propose an amendment.
Just in terms of the numbers of people that are likely to be put forward for interview with the subcommittee, which is specifically what this recommendation, I believe, is focused on, it would generally be 3 to 4 candidates at most.
Yes, just if it helps, Chair, to clarify where we are in the procedure. A motion has been proposed by Councillor Spencer and it's been seconded by Councillor Thornton. And the motion is that this committee adopts that recommendation, regardless of whether it is what was intended by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee or not. We have a member of this committee proposing that that recommendation is adopted. We now have an amendment to that recommendation, and to proceed on that amendment, we would need a seconder. If there's no seconder, it falls, and we go back to Councillor Spencer's motion. For the amendment.
Is there a second for the amendment? No, we need to deal with the amendment first before we can deal with the main motion.
The amendment is.
Councillor Thornton, can you please repeat your amendment?
So in the last part of the sentence, it would instead of saying recuse themselves of meetings with or about that candidate and appoint a substitute, it would be recuse themselves for meetings about the recruitment for that position and appoint a substitute. That covers the Councillor Keel's consistency point, which was echoed by officers.
Councillor Keel.
Sorry, it may be because it's gone 9 o'clock, but how does it answer that point? I'm not following how that minor tweak changes my concerns.
Instead of recusing yourself from consideration of the one candidate, you're recusing yourself from consideration of all candidates for that particular position. But please tell me if I've got the wording wrong, and that you can improve the wording.
Okay, so right now we're considering the amendment to Councillor Spencer's motion, and I saw Councillor Denis and Councillor Powell. Did you have your hand up as well? So Councillor Denis first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm getting a bit confused on which amendment and which bit we're talking about, but probably applies to both. I think if you've got to excuse yourself from one, there is absolutely no way you can do the other candidates. We will end up in a tribunal or something, no ifs or buts, and I've seen that before. So I would have to look, if I can't do one, then for that role, I can't do any. And I think it's quite a simple decision, because other than that, I think we're bordering on doing something unlawful.
Okay, so it sounds like you are in favour of the amendment at the moment. Thank you very much. So Councillor Powell.
So I'm happy to second that amendment on the basis of the fact that it is about the role rather than about the candidate.
Chair, can I just suggest a pragmatic way forwards that we may wish to invite Councillor Spencer to simply alter his original motion to make it clear that it's all candidates for that post.
That was the intention originally, so that I accept that wording change.
Thank you.
Well, that makes life simpler. Thank you for that. Okay, shall we then have a show of hands if members are content with that? I mean, we can do it any way you like, but a show of hands, please. If Councillor Leach, are you asking to speak before I move the vote or? Okay, thank you, Councillor Leach.
I just go back to my point earlier that there is a possibility here that our leader of this shadow council will not be on that interview for the most important position. There is a chance of that. I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen, but there is a chance. And I feel that the leader should be on that final committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Keele.
Thank you. While appreciating Councillor Thornton's way forward, I still think this is highly problematic for the reasons I've mentioned before. And fundamentally, I don't think we should be supporting hypothetical wording.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to move to the vote now if we can, because we still need to consider our committee work programme. So can I please ask if you, so the recommendation is as stated on page 2 with the amendment that councillors who are also councillors at the Sovereign Authority involved in recruitment process recuse themselves from meetings with or about a role, the position, not just the candidate. If you are in favour of that motion, would you please raise your hands? 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh God, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Against? 1, 2, 4. And abstentions? 1. Okay. In that case, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item then is the committee work programme. This item was published in a supplements pack separate from the main agenda pack. Does any member wish to make any question or comment on the proposed work programme for the remainder of the 2026-27 year? There is a slight correction. Any reference in the work programme to East Surrey should read as West Surrey. Please, can we not have those mistakes anymore? This has now been corrected in any paperwork for outside the meeting as well. So any comments or questions on the work programme, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really quick one. I just wonder if it's I think it's the last item down for the 11th of November. It's an issue I raised, a small issue I raised at the previous meeting. It's mentioned in the minutes and it says it was reported that the Chief Executive would be the returning officer and the Chief Executive's salary would be exclusive of any returning officer fees. A separate report on other allowances for senior managers would be considered at a future meeting. Is that report included in this 11th of November item? Thank you.
Yes, it is. It will cover senior officers as well.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, in that case, it's recommended that the committee notes its work programme for the remainder of 2026-27 year. Is that agreed? Thank you. The date of our next meeting will be on the 18th of September 2026. Thank you very much, everybody. The meeting is closed.